The WNBA is absolutely losing their minds right now. Caitlin Clark's biography just hit #1 on Amazon's bestseller list, and the revelations inside are making league officials panic harder than they did during her rookie season. This book is exposing everything the league tried to hide about their complete incompetence. The fallout is going to be spectacular. How long do you think it'll take before the WNBA tries to discredit this book or attack the author? Drop your predictions in the comments below.
Caitlin Clark is way more important to the WNBA than Tiger Woods was to men's golf, even though he was huge. And to then see this negativity, like why? And what should have been done? I look seriously at the leadership of the WNBA. And how could you not be prepared for this moment? You've seen it happening in the Big Ten. You've seen it in Iowa. You see these TV ratings.
So here we are, folks, watching the WNBA scramble like cockroaches when someone turns on the lights. Christine Brennan's book, Her Game. Caitlin Clark and the Revolution in Women's Sports just became the #1 bestseller on Amazon. And let me tell you, the league executives are probably having emergency meetings right about now, trying to figure out how to do damage control.
Is filling in for Mace. I've been looking forward to this all week. Christine Brennan is one of the best sports writers in the country, has been for a long time. And she has a new book out about Caitlin Clark. It's available for pre-order now.
This isn't just any book either. This is written by Christine Brennan, a veteran sports journalist who's been covering women's basketball longer than most of these current players have been alive. She's not some random blogger or social media personality looking for clicks. This woman has been in the trenches of women's sports journalism for decades, which makes her revelations about the league's incompetence even more damning.
To shake the ground of the WNBA. She's been around for a very long time, and she knows the inner and outer workings of this league. Christine Brennan let it be known in multiple interviews that the WNBA was not ready for a superstar like Caitlin Clark.
The fact that this book shot straight to #1 tells you everything you need to know about public interest and the real story behind Caitlin Clark's treatment. People aren't buying this book because they love feel-good sports stories. They're buying it because they want the truth about what really happened during Clark's transition to professional basketball. And boy, are they getting it. Let's talk about the bombshell revelation that's got everyone talking. Brennan reveals that the day after Clark declared for the WNBA draft, she called a top league official to gauge their understanding of what was coming. The official's response? They compared Clark's potential impact to Maya Moore's arrival in the league. Maya Moore. Can you believe that?
Declared for the 2024 WNBA draft, USA Today sports columnist Christine Brennan made a phone call to a top official in the WNBA. Quote, "Do you know how big this is?" Brennan asked. That official said Clark's arrival was the biggest thing to happen to the WNBA since Maya Moore came into the league. Folks, Christine Brennan knew that answer right there was like, oh crap. They have no idea what's fixing to happen. And it sounds like from this article.
Now don't get me wrong, Maya Moore was a talented player and deserves respect for her accomplishments. But comparing Clark's mainstream appeal to Maya Moore is like comparing a firecracker to a nuclear bomb. Moore was beloved within basketball circles. Sure, but outside of hardcore women's basketball fans, she was virtually unknown to the general public. Brennan knew immediately that the league had absolutely no clue what they were dealing with. Here's a second-year player who was already breaking viewership records in college, selling out arenas wherever she played, and generating more buzz than the entire WNBA had seen in years. And the league's top brass thought this was going to be just another talented rookie joining the ranks.
Answered, "What? Wait, what?" Brennan was shocked. Maya Moore, a Hall of Famer, was called, quote, "the greatest winner in the history of women's basketball" by Sports Illustrated in 2017. She was talented, beloved superstar in the league, and she deserved all the attention. But outside the league, Moore went virtually unnoticed. So Christine Brennan knew Caitlin Clark was not going to go unnoticed at all. Clark.
The level of institutional blindness this reveals is staggering. These are supposed to be the people running a professional sports league, making strategic decisions about marketing, scheduling, and player development. Yet they couldn't recognize the most obvious marketing goldmine in the history of women's sports when it was staring them in the face. What makes this even more infuriating is that it wasn't like Clark's popularity came out of nowhere. She had been building this massive following for years at Iowa. The writing was on the wall in 10-foot-tall neon letters, but somehow the WNBA's leadership was reading with their eyes closed.
Watching from home like everybody else. And I think, guys, that actually helped me understand as a journalist the fascination, because I've covered a lot over my career and been very fortunate to be at Wimbledon's and Super Bowls and Tiger Woods and you name it, I've covered it. And I'm so lucky to have done that. And I found myself fascinated, who is this? And I'm getting text messages from guys who would never have watched a second of women's basketball. Good guys, they want their daughters to play sports. I mean, good people, but just And they're texting, are you there? I'm watching. Are you seeing this performance? And that told me something that I actually was very helpful to be at home watching it versus being on press row, talking to a bunch of other journalists, that okay, there's something going on in the country here. And it's everyone's fascinated and people are standing in line for hours in the cold around the Big Ten, this barnstorming tour. And it's all about a basketball player who happens to be a woman.
Brennan's book exposes how this fundamental misunderstanding led to a cascade of missed opportunities and botched decisions. The league's marketing strategy was completely wrong from day one. Instead of building their entire promotional campaign around their new superstar, they treated her like just another draft pick who needed to earn her stripes. Remember that commercial the league ran, where they had some random employee introducing fans to the WNBA? That should have been Clark from the very beginning. She should have been on every piece of promotional material, every advertisement, every social media campaign. Instead, the league acted like they were doing her a favor by letting her play in their precious little club. The book reveals that the Indiana Fever weren't even prepared for the crowds that would show up. When Clark had her first preseason game, security staff were shocked to see fans waiting outside 2 hours before doors opened. 2 hours for a preseason WNBA game. The parking garages were jammed like it was a Pacers playoff game. 14,000 people showed up for that preseason game, and the venue staff had never seen anything like it. The guy working the parking garage said he'd only seen crowds like that for major Pacers games, not Fever games. They literally didn't have the infrastructure in place to handle the Clark effect, despite having months to prepare. This wasn't just poor planning, it was willful ignorance. The league had access to the same data everyone else did. They could see Clark's college attendance figures, her television ratings, her social media following, but they chose to ignore all of it and pretend this was going to be business as usual.
The thing I don't get, Christine, is that in the case of Tiger and in the case of Jordan, the other players and the league around them, in Tiger's case, the PGA Tour, realized that a rising tide raises all boats and were incredibly supportive of Tiger and Jordan. With Caitlyn, it seems like, for whatever reason, she's polarizing. She's been hit with more flagrant fouls than any player ever this year. They tried to come at you when you were writing a story and said, don't ask questions about why people don't like Caitlyn Clark. But I'm going to ask you, Christine, why is she polarizing in your opinion? Why do people not embrace the phenomenon that is Caitlyn Clark?
It's one of the big points in the book. I deal with all of this and my research and reporting, because I was perplexed as well. I mean, this is the greatest moment ever for the WNBA. Yep. We wish it happened sooner. Of course we wish it happened sooner. There were amazing players who, as you know, both you guys know, were toiling in obscurity, the male-dominated mainstream sports media ignoring them.
The financial implications of this incompetence are mind-blowing. The book references Dr. Ryan Brewer's analysis of Clark's economic impact, and the numbers were so staggering that he thought he'd made a mistake. He ran the calculations multiple times because the results seemed too good to be true. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in economic impact from one player. Hotel bookings, restaurant sales, merchandise revenue, television advertising rates. Clark's presence affected every aspect of the women's basketball economy, and the league almost fumbled this opportunity because they couldn't see past their own limited expectations. The book also exposes the cultural problems within the league that made this disaster inevitable. There's apparently a mentality among some WNBA officials and players that mainstream success somehow compromises the league's authenticity. It's the most backward thinking imaginable for a professional sports organization. Brennan interviewed sociologist Harry Edwards, who pointed out that the league should have held seminars for existing players to prepare them for Clark's arrival and the attention it would bring. Instead of helping players understand how Clark's popularity would benefit everyone, the league just threw her into the lion's den and hoped for the best. This is where the book gets really interesting from a psychological perspective. Edwards suggested that the league could have explained to players that Clark's success would raise all boats. Better television contracts, higher salaries, more sponsorship opportunities, increased visibility for everyone. Instead, many players seem to view her popularity as a zero-sum game where her success meant less for them. The racial dynamics that Brennan explores are particularly sensitive but important. She doesn't shy away from the fact that Clark's fan base includes many people who hadn't previously followed women's basketball, and some of these new fans might not align with the political views of existing players and league officials. The book suggests that the league should have prepared for this cultural clash instead of pretending it wouldn't happen. When you suddenly have hundreds of thousands of new fans with different perspectives engaging with your product, that's going to create some friction. Smart leadership would have anticipated this and developed strategies to manage it constructively. Instead, the league seemed to be caught off guard by every aspect of the Clark phenomenon. They weren't prepared for the crowds, they weren't prepared for the media attention, they weren't prepared for the financial windfall, and they definitely weren't prepared for the cultural implications. The book's commercial success is sending shockwaves through the WNBA because it's exposing their incompetence to a mainstream audience. This isn't just basketball insiders reading about league politics. This is regular people learning about how badly the WNBA mismanaged their biggest opportunity in franchise history. The timing of this book's release is particularly damaging for the league. Clark is now in her second season and continuing to break records and drive viewership. Every game she plays that draws massive audiences serves as a reminder of what the league almost threw away through their own stupidity. The international implications of Brennan's revelations are also significant. Women's basketball is growing globally, and the WNBA had a chance to position itself as the undisputed leader of that movement. Clark's appeal wasn't just domestic, she was drawing international attention to American women's basketball. But the league's dysfunction became part of the story instead of Clark's excellence. The book exposes how the league's marketing department was completely unprepared for the Clark phenomenon. They had no comprehensive strategy for capitalizing on her popularity, no understanding of her demographic appeal, and no plan for sustaining the momentum she was generating. This is basic business strategy stuff that any competent organization should have handled easily. When you have a generational talent with massive mainstream appeal entering your league, you build your entire promotional strategy around that person. You don't treat them like just another employee who needs to prove themselves. The media strategy failures that Brennan documents are equally damning. Instead of controlling the narrative around Clark's arrival and emphasizing the positive impact she was having, the league allowed hostile voices to dominate the conversation. They let players and coaches make snide comments without pushback, and they failed to defend their own product when it was under attack. The book reveals that there were people within the organization who understood what was happening and tried to sound the alarm, but they were apparently ignored by decision makers who were too set in their ways to adapt to new realities. It's a classic case of institutional inertia, preventing necessary change. The scheduling decisions that Brennan exposes are particularly infuriating. The league had every opportunity to maximize Clark's impact by putting her games in prime television slots and optimal markets. Instead, they seemed to go out of their way to minimize her visibility, almost like they were embarrassed by their own success. The merchandising failures documented in the book are another example of the league's incompetence. Clark's jerseys and gear should have been everywhere from day one, but the league couldn't even keep basic merchandise in stock. They left millions of dollars on the table because they couldn't handle basic supply chain management. The book's success is also highlighting the disconnect between what fans actually want and what league officials think they want. People are clearly hungry for honest analysis of the Clark situation and the league's handling of it. The fact that this book shot to #1 proves there's a massive audience for this kind of content. The social media reaction to the book's revelations has been overwhelmingly critical of the league's leadership. People are sharing quotes and excerpts that expose just how clueless the WNBA was about their own situation. It's becoming a public relations nightmare for an organization that was already struggling with credibility issues. The book also exposes the role of established media in perpetuating the league's dysfunction. Instead of calling out obvious mismanagement, many traditional sports reporters seem to go along with the narrative that Clark's popularity was somehow problematic rather than beneficial. Brennan's willingness to tell this story honestly is refreshing. In a media environment where many reporters are afraid to criticize women's sports, even when that criticism is clearly warranted. She's not interested in protecting feelings or maintaining politically correct narratives. She's focused on documenting what actually happened. The economic data that the book presents is devastating for the league's reputation. When you have hard numbers showing that one player generated hundreds of millions in economic impact, and the league almost botched the whole thing through their own incompetence, it raises serious questions about their leadership capabilities. The book reveals that the league's problems weren't just limited to Clark's situation, they extend to fundamental issues with how the organization operates. The marketing is amateur, the business strategy is incoherent, and the leadership seems more interested in politics than in growing the sport. The international perspective that Brennan brings to this story is particularly valuable. She's covered women's basketball around the world and understands how other leagues and organizations have successfully marketed their stars. The WNBA's approach was completely at odds with international best practices. The book makes it clear that this story is far from over. Clark is still early in her career, and the league is still struggling to figure out how to handle the phenomenon they've been blessed with. The question is whether they'll learn from their mistakes or continue stumbling along in typical fashion. The corporate sponsorship implications of these revelations are significant. Major brands want to partner with competent organizations that can maximize their marketing investments. When potential sponsors read about the league's dysfunction and missed opportunities, it makes them hesitant to get involved. The book's documentation of internal league politics is particularly damaging. Brennan reveals that there were factions within the organization that were actually opposed to Clark's success, viewing it as somehow threatening to the league's established culture. It's self-destructive thinking that explains a lot about why the situation was handled so poorly. The fan testimonials that Brennan includes in the book are powerful evidence of Clark's impact. These aren't just basketball fans. They're people who had never watched women's basketball before but became engaged because of Clark's compelling story and exciting play style. The book exposes how the league's attempts at damage control have only made things worse. Instead of acknowledging their mistakes and adapting their approach, they've doubled down on failed strategies and tried to minimize Clark's impact. It's like watching someone dig their own grave deeper and deeper. The historical context that Brennan provides makes the league's failures even more inexcusable. Women's basketball has been struggling for mainstream acceptance for decades, and when that acceptance finally arrived in the form of Caitlin Clark, the league treated it like an inconvenience rather than a blessing. The book's success is also proving that there's a huge appetite for content that challenges the established narratives around women's sports. People want honest analysis, not the sanitized cheerleading that often passes for sports journalism in this space. The psychological profiles that Brennan provides of key decision makers reveal a leadership class that was completely unprepared for success. They were so used to operating in obscurity that they couldn't adapt when the spotlight finally arrived. The book documents how the league's dysfunction affected not just Clark, but other players as well. When you create a toxic environment around your biggest star, it impacts team chemistry, player development, and overall league culture. The media training failures that Brennan exposes are particularly embarrassing. The league apparently provided no guidance to players and coaches about how to handle the increased media attention that Clark was bringing. This led to a series of public relations disasters that could have been easily avoided. The book reveals that some within the organization recognized the problems early on, but were unable to implement necessary changes because of institutional resistance. It's a classic case of an organization being its own worst enemy. The international implications of the league's mismanagement extend beyond just basketball. American women's sports had an opportunity to showcase excellence and professionalism on a global stage, but the WNBA's dysfunction became part of the story instead. Christine Brennan's book just exposed the WNBA's complete incompetence for the whole world to see, and honestly, it's about time. The league had every opportunity to maximize the Caitlin Clark phenomenon and instead fumbled it spectacularly. If you want more brutal analysis of sports league failures, smash that like button and subscribe for content that doesn't sugarcoat the truth. Dia.